For as long as I can remember, I was the responsible one, the family's invisible backbone, the one everyone forgot to thank. I'm Lindsay Howard, 40 years old, a school counselor by day, a mother by heart, and the unpaid emotional laborer and financial lifeline for a family that treats my sacrifices like background noise. Last Thanksgiving still stings. The way Mom, Shannon, sat across from me at the dinner table, her eyes sharp as knives. She barely touched the food I'd spent hours preparing. And then, with that sly, cutting tone she's perfected over the years, whispered, "You owe us again, you know." It was subtle, a jab hidden beneath the forced smiles of the family gathering, but it landed hard. I've paid for Greg's tuition, covered emergency car repairs for Mom's boyfriend, and yet, I'm still the problem, the one who's not doing enough, or who's too frugal, or who's too sensitive. I keep a ledger, thick and meticulously detailed, tracking every dollar I've ever poured into this family, every favor, every moment of emotional labor. It's a habit born from years of being taken for granted, a secret strength I hold close. Sometimes I imagine burning it, letting the past go, but the ledger is proof of my worth, the only validation I've ever been able to hold on to. Despite the exhaustion, the bruised pride, I still hope for peace, for a moment when we might all just be a family without these constant battles. But something feels different this year. The tension beneath our polite smiles is sharper, and Shannon's voice, sharp, demanding, cuts through the veneer of civility like a blade. I brace myself, knowing the storm is coming, and I'm not sure how much longer I can hold on. I remember the moment everything shifted. The night I realized I was no longer just the responsible daughter, but the scapegoat, the one no one was rooting for. I was 16, and Shannon had married my stepfather 6 months earlier. One evening, he demanded I call him Dad. I refused. "You're not my dad," I said plainly. The room froze, his face twisted with anger, but it was my mother's reaction that broke me. She looked away, silently permitting his fury to fall on me alone. That night, I walked out of the house, my heart pounding, tears blurring the streetlights as I disappeared into the night. I never fully returned, not emotionally. Greg was the golden child, showered with praise and indulgence. His every mistake was excused, his college tuition paid without question. Meanwhile, I juggled 2 jobs and loans to finance my own education, all the while swallowing the ache of being the black sheep. Shannon's favoritism wasn't just blatant, it was strategic. She wielded it like a weapon, protecting Greg with a fierce glow while casting me as the problem to be managed. I tried to rationalize it. After all, families have their roles, and maybe love would balance the scales eventually. But the resentment grew, a quiet storm brewing beneath my calm exterior. Each slight, each dismissal, each demand chipped away at my sense of belonging. I learned early to swallow the pain, to become the family's steady rock even as I felt myself cracking inside. I buried those memories deep, knowing the family wouldn't acknowledge them, and I couldn't afford to be the troublemaker. Over the years, I became the family's ATM and emotional caretaker, the one who quietly absorbed their needs while my own drained away. I paid $75,000 toward Greg's college tuition, $25,000 in medical bills for Mom's chronic health issues, and loaned $50,000 for repairs on the old family house Shannon still lived in. Money I earned by working extra shifts, sacrificing sleep, and postponing our own dreams. Mark, my husband, sees it all. He's my quiet ally, the one who reminds me I deserve better, who knows about my ledger, my secret power, a journal that holds every receipt, every favor, every moment of invisible labor that no one else bothers to recognize. Greg remains oblivious, wrapped up in his own life, while Shannon's demands grow louder, her entitlement more blatant. She deflects any acknowledgement of my sacrifices, twisting conversations until the spotlight is always on her struggles, her victimhood. Julia, my teenage daughter, watches all of this with wide eyes, innocent, yet perceptive. She's my hope, the reason I cling to the idea that this cycle can be broken. I want her to grow up knowing that she deserves respect, that love isn't measured by how much you give without getting anything back. Mark and I discuss it quietly, weaving a web of protection around Julia. But I know the fight isn't just about money or favors. It's about reclaiming my dignity in a family that's long forgotten its meaning. Every day, I steel myself for the next demand, the next emotional grenade, knowing that my patience is wearing thin. The last family reunion is etched in my mind like a wound that won't heal. Shannon sneered at my frugal lunch, a simple sandwich I'd packed to save money, and loudly mocked me in front of relatives. "Maybe if you spent less time counting pennies, you'd have more to give us," she said, her voice dripping with scorn. The room fell silent, the air thick with discomfort. Greg chuckled awkwardly, not knowing whether to laugh or look away. Mark's jaw clenched in silent defense, but I just forced a smile, swallowing the sting that spread through my chest like acid. It wasn't just embarrassment. It was the crushing weight of years of invisibility, distilled into a single moment. I wondered with a hollow ache if this was how they truly saw me, an endless well to be drained, a problem to be dismissed. Later, alone, I told myself it was just Shannon's bitterness, a fleeting cruelty born from her own insecurities. I tried to rationalize it, to silence the doubts gnawing at my mind. But deep down, the humiliation planted a seed, a dangerous, growing seed of rebellion. Maybe it was time to stop being invisible. Maybe it was time to make them see me. For the first time in a long time, I felt a flicker of something I hadn't dared to name: defiance. The moment I pushed back, even slightly, the walls began closing in. Shannon didn't miss a beat, her eyes narrowing to a cold, calculating gleam that I'd come to recognize as the start of her counterattack. She whispered poison to Greg first, those familiar words dripping with venom. "Lindsay's ungrateful. She's selfish, always holding grudges, stirring up drama where there isn't any." I could feel her weaving a web, a silent network of family members, her flying monkeys, who suddenly questioned everything about me. At family gatherings, I caught them shooting sideways glances, their smiles tight and forced. I wasn't just the scapegoat anymore. I was being painted as the villain. Shannon's gaslighting was relentless. "I've done everything for her," she told anyone who would listen, her voice dripping with false sincerity. "She's the one who's cold and distant." When I tried to explain myself, my words bounced off walls fortified by years of manipulation. Even Mark, usually my steadfast support, started to look uncertain, the strain showing in his eyes when Shannon casually undermined our conversations. I caught him hesitating, biting his tongue when I needed him most. Shannon's control tactics escalated quickly. She demanded constant praise, words of gratitude that never came, and when they didn't, she punished me with the silent treatment that weighed heavier than any argument. I felt myself shrinking, the isolation tightening around me like a noose. At a Sunday family brunch, I arrived hopeful, hoping we could just enjoy the meal without conflict. But Shannon was a storm waiting to break. Her voice was sweet, almost syrupy, as she cornered Greg, whispering that I was draining the family dry and making everything about my own pain. When I tried to join the conversation, she turned away, dismissing me with a look that said I was the problem. The others followed her lead, and suddenly, I was the outsider, the troublemaker. My throat tightened, and I swallowed the lump of hurt and frustration. I was exhausted, but the facade had to hold. I couldn't give them the satisfaction of breaking me down completely. Not yet. The worst part was the quiet moments afterward, when I was alone with Mark. He wanted to help, but I saw the worry in his eyes, the way Shannon's words had seeded doubt. Even briefly, I felt like I was losing ground, losing the family I'd tried so hard to hold together, and yet I refused to surrender. I clung to the ledger hidden in my desk drawer, the proof of everything I'd given, everything they refused to see. It was my shield, my secret weapon against the unfairness, but the price was clear. The more I resisted, the more the family seemed to turn away from me, swallowed by Shannon's lies and manipulation. I was fighting a battle on all fronts, and the battlefield was every family gathering, every phone call, every whispered conversation behind my back. I realized then that my small acts of resistance had sparked a firestorm. Shannon's network was closing ranks, and I was dangerously alone in the middle of it. But beneath the loneliness, a flicker of resolve remained. quiet and steady. I might be pushed down, but I wasn't finished. Not yet. I remember the afternoon I tried to fix it. The house was unusually quiet. The noise of the world softened behind closed windows. I sat Shannon down in the living room, the air thick with a tension I hoped to ease. I pulled out a carefully prepared summary, a simple ledger printout listing every dollar, every favor, every silent sacrifice I'd made over the years. I spoke softly, my voice steady but laced with exhaustion. "I've supported this family for years," I said, "but I'm tired. I need acknowledgement. I need us to be honest with each other." But as soon as the words left my mouth, Shannon's eyes glazed over with crocodile tears. "I'm the victim here," she sniffled dramatically, clutching her chest. "I'm the one who sacrificed everything for you all." The room shifted. The narrative flipped upside down in an instant. Nothing I said seemed to matter anymore. My facts, my evidence, they dissolved beneath her flood of self-pity. I looked around and saw the familiar faces of family, their eyes flickering with doubt. I had hoped for understanding, but instead I was met with skepticism, suspicion. Our cousin Elaine, who I had hoped would mediate fairly, sided with Shannon without hesitation. She brushed off my concerns as being too sensitive and making mountains out of molehills. I felt the weight of their judgment settle over me like a cloak of invisibility. The more I tried to explain, the more trapped I felt, as if I was drowning in a sea of disbelief. Shannon's manipulation was masterful. She turned my plea for fairness into an attack on her character. By the end of that day, I was more isolated than ever. No one saw the toll it took on me, the years of quiet suffering beneath the surface. I left that conversation hollow, the silence in the car on the way home louder than any argument. Mark held my hand tightly but said little, the defeat evident in his eyes. I realized then that facts and reason were powerless against the emotional battlefield Shannon had mastered. My hope for a peaceful resolution cracked, and with it, a painful truth settled in. I couldn't fix this by talking anymore. The ledger, the symbol of all my sacrifices, felt heavier than ever as I locked it away again. I wondered if they would ever truly hear me, or if the family I'd carried on my back was slipping away, replaced by a version I barely recognized. The bitter taste of betrayal lingered, but beneath it, a fragile ember of determination began to burn. I had to find another way. Julia's 13th birthday was supposed to be a quiet celebration, a small gathering of close family, and a few friends. I had planned carefully, stretching our budget to give her a day she'd remember without breaking the bank. But Shannon had other plans. The moment the guests arrived, she was on the attack, her voice loud enough to cut through the laughter and music. "Look at this," she said, gesturing at the modest decorations. "Lindsay can't even manage a proper birthday for her own daughter." Her words hung heavy in the air, charged with contempt. I felt the room shift, the warmth draining out as eyes darted between me and Shannon. The whispers started softly, then grew, a tide of judgment rolling over my carefully curated calm. Greg, ever eager to side with Mom, joined in without hesitation. "You're always putting yourself first," he snapped, too cheap to give Julia what she deserves. Mark stood by me quietly, his jaw clenched, but even his quiet defense was swallowed by the noise. The humiliation was suffocating. Julia's eyes welled up with tears, her birthday clouded by the family drama I'd hoped to avoid. I saw neighbors, old family friends, even casual acquaintances staring, their eyes filled with pity or judgment. I couldn't tell which. The financial impact was real. I had budgeted so tightly to avoid this kind of disaster, yet the social fallout was far worse. This wasn't just a spat, it was a calculated public shaming, a deliberate strike to weaken me in front of everyone I cared about. I clenched my fists, swallowing the sting that spread through my chest like poison. I was the family scapegoat once again, the one to blame for every shortcoming, every disappointment. Shannon's cruelty was unmistakable, a cold, measured assault designed to break my spirit and isolate me further. As I held Julia, whispering reassurances I barely believed myself, I realized how deep the damage went. It wasn't just about money or events. It was about power, control, and the unyielding grip of a family that refused to see me as anything but the problem. That night, the echo of Shannon's words haunted me. a brutal reminder that my place in this family was far from secure. The cost of standing up had never felt so high. Desperation pushed me to that last, painful conversation with Shannon. I sat across from her, the room dim and heavy, my voice firm but carefully measured. "I'm willing to help," I said, "but it has to be fair. I can't keep being your ATM and emotional dumping ground." I laid out my terms clearly: respect, limits on financial demands, and acknowledgement of my boundaries. For once, I was not pleading. I was setting rules. But Shannon's eyes narrowed, her face twisting into a mask of betrayal and rage. "How could you do this to me?" she spat. "You're abandoning your family. You're turning your back on me." Her words cut deep, but it was the threat that shattered whatever fragile hope remained. She warned that if I didn't comply, Julia would be cut off from the family, barred from the only relatives she had left. The venom in her voice was unmistakable. This was manipulation wielded like a weapon, disguised as concern. I sat back, my heart pounding. The line had been crossed. No longer was this a conversation about fairness. It was a battle for control, using the innocent as collateral damage. I saw through the mask, the calculated cruelty beneath the tears and accusations. I understood then that peaceful resolution was a myth in this war. The weight of the threat settled on me, heavy and suffocating. Mark reached out, his hand finding mine, silent support in the storm. Julia watched from the doorway, her eyes wide, catching the moment I realized I couldn't fix this on my own terms anymore. The family I'd tried so hard to protect had become a battlefield, and the price was more than I was willing to pay. That evening, as I closed the door behind me, the resolve in my chest burned hotter. I might have lost the peace I sought, but I hadn't lost myself. Not yet. The aftermath of that confrontation was a suffocating fog that swallowed me whole. Shannon's venomous words didn't just linger, they multiplied, infecting the minds of everyone around me. Suddenly, I was a pariah in the very circles I'd trusted. The whispers started small, barely noticeable, but soon they swelled into a chorus of accusations. "Lindsay's cold," they said. "Ungrateful. Selfish." I could hear the jabs flying through the grapevine, friends, relatives, even casual acquaintances, all repeating Shannon's poison like gospel. Greg, who once smiled at me with brotherly warmth, now barely acknowledged my existence unless forced. He'd become a loyal soldier in Shannon's war against me, his silence more cutting than any argument. Mark's support remained, but even he carried a weariness I hadn't seen before, a subtle retreat behind tired eyes. The tension in our home was palpable. Every shared glance, every silence spoke volumes of the strain we were under. I found myself retreating into the quiet corners of our house, those moments alone heavier than any company. The isolation wasn't just physical. It was a gnawing, consuming loneliness that crept into my bones. I questioned everything: my worth, my intentions, the years of sacrifice that had built the fragile foundation beneath my feet. Had I been the problem all along? Was I truly as cold and ungrateful as Shannon claimed? The echo of her constant calls, each one dripping with blame and hurtful accusations, filled my nights. "You're destroying the family," she'd say, her voice a broken record of guilt and manipulation. I wanted to scream, to defend myself, but the words caught in my throat, swallowed by exhaustion and despair. The ledger, once a symbol of my strength, now felt like a chain binding me to a family that refused to see the truth. I was utterly alone, drowning in a sea of doubt, with no lifeline in sight. The family gatherings, once something I dreaded, became arenas of quiet hostility. At each event, I arrived hopeful, clinging to the fragile hope that maybe this time, things would be different. But Shannon's presence was a storm, her eyes sharp and calculating, her smile a mask that barely concealed the contempt beneath. She wielded her words like weapons, slicing through any attempt I made to connect. Even Greg, usually the golden child basking in their mother's favor, took her cue, his laughter at my expense sharp and unkind. The others looked on, some with pity, some with suspicion, but none with the understanding I so desperately craved. Julia's wide eyes haunted me most, her innocent confusion a mirror to my own shattered hope. I wanted to shield her from the cruelty, but I couldn't even protect myself. The walls closed in tighter, the isolation growing heavier with every passing day. In those dark moments, I felt my spirit fracturing. The woman who had patiently carried this family, who had silently endured so much, was unraveling beneath the weight of it all. The self-doubt gnawed relentlessly, whispering lies that threatened to drown out the truth. I was supposed to be the rock, the steady hand. But now I felt like a crumbling ruin. The crushing loneliness was a hollow ache that settled deep within. And for the first time in years, I questioned if I could keep going. Shannon's campaign had succeeded in fragmenting the family and in breaking me. But somewhere beneath the rubble, a faint ember of defiance flickered, fragile, yet stubborn. I wasn't ready to surrender completely. Not yet. Thanksgiving arrived with its usual tension. But this year, the weight pressing down on me felt unbearable. Julia and I walked into the house, the familiar smells of roasted turkey and pumpkin pie mingling with an undercurrent of unease. I hoped to cling to the holiday's promise of gratitude and togetherness, but the moment we stepped inside, I felt the atmosphere shift. Shannon's eyes locked onto me with a predator's focus, her smile tight and artificial. As the meal began, her words sliced through the festive air, venom disguised as concern. "Lindsay, you're so cold these days," she said, voice dripping with false pity. "Always putting yourself first, never thinking about the family." My chest tightened, the familiar knot twisting painfully. I kept my voice steady, refusing to rise to her bait, but the damage was done. Then came the final blow, Shannon's public demand that I cover an unexpected family expense, a surprise trip for Greg and her boyfriend. I stared at her, disbelief and exhaustion washing over me. "I can't," I said quietly, the refusal barely audible but firm. The room erupted. Shannon's voice rose into a scream, accusing me of selfishness, of destroying the family with my stinginess. Greg joined in, sneering at my cheapness, mocking the sacrifices I'd made, and called into question the values I'd tried to uphold. Julia sat frozen, eyes wide with horror, clutching her napkin as the verbal assault raged around her. Then, amidst the chaos, my phone buzzed, a sharp, cold intrusion. The screen flashed an overdraft alert, a notification that stole the breath from my lungs. Unauthorized withdrawals, thousands of dollars missing over the years. The room fell unnervingly silent. I looked up, voice trembling but clear as I announced the betrayal. The shock registered on every face. Even Greg's smugness faltered for a moment. The weight of years of silent theft crashed down, irreversible and raw. In that moment, something inside me shattered, a dam breaking after years of holding back the flood. The humiliation, the pain, the betrayal, they fused into a fierce, burning clarity. No longer was I the broken daughter, the scapegoat, the silent sufferer. I was something new, a woman awakening to her own strength, ready to reclaim what was hers. The dynamic shifted irreversibly. The battlefield had changed, and I was no longer a passive player. The cold clarity settled like ice in my veins, hardening into resolve. In the days after Thanksgiving, I retreated into silence, the storm of that evening swirling relentlessly in my mind. Alone in the quiet of our home, I pulled out the ledger, a battered notebook filled with years of painstaking records. Each entry was a testament to my sacrifices, a chronicle of generosity met with neglect. As I reread the lists of tuition payments, medical bills, home repairs, and countless favors, a fire ignited inside me. The anger wasn't just about the stolen money. It was about every moment I'd been invisible, every demand disguised as love, every manipulation disguised as concern. The pattern was undeniable. I'd been the family's invisible backbone, their ATM, their scapegoat. The realization was both devastating and liberating. Anger bubbled beneath my skin, raw and unfiltered, fueled by years of betrayal and emotional exhaustion. But it was a different kind of anger, one that didn't consume me but energized me. I whispered aloud, a vow to myself that felt like a promise carved in stone. Never again would I allow myself to be exploited, dismissed, or broken. The pain I carried was now a weapon, my heartbreak a catalyst for transformation. For the first time in a long time, I felt empowered, not by forgiveness or resignation, but by truth. I reached for my phone and dialed Mark's number, my voice steady and sure despite the turmoil. "It's time," I said simply. "We're going to show them who really carried this family." That call marked a turning point. Mark's voice was steady and supportive, a lifeline in the chaos. We talked long into the night, outlining a plan that was both careful and resolute. "You've been the backbone for far too long," he said quietly. "Now it's time they see it too." Together, we decided to gather every shred of evidence: bank statements, receipts, invoices, anything that could create an irrefutable paper trail. My ledger would be the cornerstone of this audit, the proof that no one could deny or distort. We spoke about timing, about how to present the facts in a way that would maximize impact without descending into chaos or cruelty. As we strategized, I felt a shift within myself. The emotional turmoil began to give way to purpose and precision. Victimhood was a role I was shedding, replaced by agency and determination. I spent hours organizing documents, seeking advice on how to proceed legally and effectively. This wasn't a reckless act of revenge. It was a measured, strategic step toward reclaiming my dignity and setting the record straight. The plan was designed to expose truth without malice, to demand accountability without igniting unnecessary conflict. For the first time in years, I felt a flicker of hope, not fragile or fleeting, but steady and strong. I was no longer just surviving the family war. I was preparing to win it. Mark and I spent hours poring over every detail, mapping out the full extent of the family's financial dependence on me. What started as a vague sense of burden soon became a stark, undeniable picture. Greg's tuition fees, never a cent paid by him, were quietly covered by me for years, the invoices tucked away in my ledger like dirty secrets. There were medical bills for Shannon's ongoing health issues, some of which were only partially paid, while others lingered unpaid until I stepped in, swallowing my own expenses. The house itself, a shared family home, bore scars of my loans for repairs and upkeep, often fronted without acknowledgement or repayment. Even Shannon's lifestyle, with its small luxuries and endless demands, was propped up by my generosity disguised as maternal care. It was staggering. Each entry in my ledger no longer felt like a personal sacrifice, but a thread in a tangled web of exploitation. We didn't stop at the numbers. Mark helped me chart the emotional undercurrents, the guilt trips, the veiled threats, the constant emotional blackmail Shannon wielded. Her control was anchored in this dependency, a toxic cocktail of obligation and manipulation. Shannon's victim act was a masterstroke, making it nearly impossible for anyone to question her needs without seeming cruel. But seeing it all laid out, the pattern was clear. Her power was built on my silence and compliance. Consulting a financial advisor confirmed the audit's weight. It wasn't just bookkeeping. This was an exposure of years of financial exploitation masquerading as family loyalty. I realized then that my ledger was no longer just a record. It was a weapon. Every dollar logged, every favor noted, every sacrifice chronicled, transformed into undeniable proof. The shock of how deeply they depended on me, the scale of manipulation, hit like a punch to the gut. Yet beneath that shock, a cold, hard resolve took root. This wasn't merely about reclaiming money or settling debts. It was about reclaiming my dignity and breaking a cycle that had defined my life for far too long. I felt a surge of strength like never before, ready to disrupt the toxic dynamic that had held me captive for years. Despite the emotional weight, I knew the next steps had to be precise, careful, and silent. Outwardly, I maintained my calm, the mask of the reliable daughter, sister, mother, counselor, always composed. But behind closed doors, Mark and I meticulously prepared. I secured every password, backed up financial records, and triple-checked the ledger, ensuring no detail was overlooked. We consulted a trusted attorney who guided us on presenting the evidence legally and effectively, emphasizing the importance of clarity, calm, and unassailable facts during the family confrontation. Mark and I rehearsed countless scenarios, practicing steady, measured responses to anticipated manipulations, especially from Shannon. At family gatherings, I wore a quiet confidence, masking the storm brewing beneath. Shannon's usual demands and guilt-laden accusations bounced off an emerging armor of detachment and resolve. It was a delicate balancing act, appearing unchanged while silently preparing to shatter the illusion. The tension between maintaining the facade and readying for the inevitable confrontation hung thickly in the air, invisible to them but suffocating to me. Each smile I forced, each casual conversation, was a thread holding together the fragile peace before the storm. The countdown to Thanksgiving felt like walking on a precipice, every step deliberate, every breath controlled, knowing the moment of reckoning was drawing near. Then, during the final review of the audit, a discovery shattered even my careful preparation. Shannon had been stealing from me. The evidence was irrefutable. Small withdrawals, unapproved transfers, falsified receipts, all pointing to a deliberate, calculated theft totaling over $30,000. The numbers flashed on the screen, each one a betrayal cutting deeper than I'd imagined. It explained the chronic overdrafts, the missing funds I had thought were accounting errors or my own forgetfulness. But this was no accident. My own mother had siphoned money from my accounts while masquerading as the victim. The betrayal was a brutal blow, raw and unforgiving. My voice trembled as I shared the revelation with Mark, the weight of it sinking into my bones. "This changes everything," I whispered, anger and disbelief mingling in my tone. The scope of Shannon's lies was deeper, darker than I ever allowed myself to suspect. We agreed immediately to include this evidence in the audit presentation. This wasn't just about unpaid tuition or bills anymore. It was about exposing a theft that underscored a lifetime of manipulation and deception. The emotional weight of this discovery ignited a fierce moral clarity in me. I was no longer standing at the edge. I was stepping into the arena fully armed. The betrayal fueled my resolve, sharpening my focus on the ultimate goal, justice and unbreakable boundaries. With the plan solidified, I began the first phase of execution silently and deliberately. No more loans, no more paying bills for Shannon or Greg. I blocked Shannon's access to joint accounts, a quiet but decisive move that shifted the financial power. Service providers were notified to require direct payments rather than allowing her to pass expenses through me. Shannon, for the moment, remained oblivious, interpreting my withdrawal as fatigue or bitterness, unaware that the foundation she'd relied on was crumbling. I watched the subtle cracks form, the unpaid bills piling up, the growing tension in family conversations, the confusion spreading like a slow poison. I sent Shannon a formal letter outlining the audit's findings and demanding repayment of every unauthorized withdrawal. The tone was calm, firm, unyielding. No room left for manipulation or denial. The letter was more than a demand. It was a boundary drawn in ink and paper. Family members noticed the shift, but didn't yet connect the dots. The quiet changes unsettled the family's financial ecosystem, a ripple that began to disturb the toxic status quo. I felt a surge of both fear and exhilaration. This was only the beginning. The consequences of my actions had started to unfold, their impact subtle, but irreversible. For the first time, I was no longer the passive caretaker. I was the one setting the rules, and the family had no choice but to reckon with the new reality. Thanksgiving arrived with a brittle chill that seemed to seep beneath my skin as I stepped into the familiar chaos of the family home. The scent of roasting turkey and sweet pumpkin pie filled the air, but it couldn't mask the tension crackling like static between the well-worn walls. Everyone was gathered. Shannon, her eyes glinting with that predatory mix of entitlement and false warmth. Greg, his smug grin barely concealing his discomfort. Julia, clutching my hand with wide, uncertain eyes. And Mark, silent and steady at my side. I felt the weight in my chest. Not fear, but a fierce determination that had been smoldering for years, now ready to ignite. As the meal wound down and plates were cleared, I stood, feeling every gaze settle on me like a heavy cloak. I took a breath, steadying the tremor in my hands, and reached into my bag for the folder I'd prepared, an arsenal of truth. The room shifted, the chatter fading into a brittle silence as I began. Calm, measured, I laid out the ledger I'd kept, every tuition check I'd sent for Greg, every medical bill I'd quietly covered, every repair I'd financed without a whisper of thanks. I pulled out bank statements, receipts, and the damning evidence of Shannon's theft. Unauthorized withdrawals, transfers made in the dead of night, numbers that screamed betrayal. The facts were undeniable, irrefutable. Shannon's face drained of color, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. She stammered denials, but I held the room's attention, refusing to be derailed. Greg shifted uncomfortably, the first flicker of awareness breaking through his usual arrogance. Mark's quiet presence bolstered me, his steady gaze reinforcing the truth I spoke. For years I gave without thanks, I said, my voice steady but firm. And today, I set the record straight. This family cannot thrive on lies and manipulation. The power dynamic had flipped. I was no longer the scapegoat, the invisible caretaker. I was the undeniable force. Shannon's attempts to interrupt were met with cold refusals. Julia's eyes shone with wonder, the entire family witnessing a transformation that was as exhilarating as it was overdue. This was my champagne moment. The moment I reclaimed my power and drew the line in the sand. In the days that followed, the fallout was swift and brutal. Shannon's carefully constructed world began to unravel as whispers of doubt grew louder among relatives and friends. Greg, once unshakable in his entitlement, started to distance himself, his usual smirks replaced by awkward silences and averted eyes. Shannon's desperation became palpable. She bombarded my phone with frantic calls, tearful apologies dripping with false remorse, promises of change that tasted hollow. But I stood firm, my boundaries etched in stone. The manipulative strings she'd pulled for so long snapped under the weight of truth, leaving her isolated and exposed. Behind closed doors, Shannon's fury simmered and boiled over, but it no longer held power over me. I watched her lash out in private, her venom impotent against the shield I'd built. Mark and Julia drew closer, their quiet support a balm to my bruised spirit. The family dynamic was shifting, painful and raw, but necessary. For the first time in years, I felt a cautious relief, the crushing burden of silence and sacrifice lifting, replaced by a fragile hope that healing could begin. The path ahead was uncertain, but I was no longer alone or powerless. Shannon's final attempts to regain control were frantic and futile. She escalated her tactics, sending frantic texts that bled desperation, enlisting distant relatives to launch emotional attacks cloaked in concern, and even threatening legal action in a last-ditch effort to intimidate me. She spun tales of betrayal and destruction, painting herself as the victim of my ruthless exposure. But I was ready. I blocked toxic contacts with a quiet decisiveness, documenting every threat, every manipulation. I consulted my attorney, ensuring I was protected and prepared. The so-called flying monkeys lost their grip as more family members rallied around my truth. Shannon's isolation deepened. Her control evaporated like mist at dawn. My consistent boundaries, backed by meticulous evidence, neutralized every attempt to gaslight or intimidate. Each failed manipulation only cemented my new status, the woman who would no longer be broken or silenced. The final attempts to pull me back into her web crumbled spectacularly, a testament to the strength and resolve I'd forged from years of pain. With Shannon's grip shattered, I finally felt peace settle over me like a long-awaited dawn. My relationship with Mark blossomed into a sanctuary of mutual respect and shared triumph. Julia watched quietly, absorbing lessons of courage and self-worth that would shape her future. I established clear, firm boundaries with Shannon and Greg, limiting contact to necessary interactions monitored with accountability. Shannon faced the consequences: financial restitution demands, social isolation, but I approached her with compassion tempered by caution. As I reflected on this journey, from the invisible, overburdened daughter to the woman who reclaimed her dignity, I felt a quiet pride. Thanksgiving, once a battlefield of pain and silence, now symbolized resilience, hope, and the hard-won freedom that comes from standing firm. I whispered a truth to myself. I may have been forced out at 16, but I came home on my terms, stronger, wiser, and free. The future stretched before me, bright and uncharted, grounded in self-love and the power to protect my peace.